Hey, Strong Girls. I'm Molly Herford, sports journalist, ultra runner, cyclist, and author, and founder of Strong Girl Publishing.
And I'm Dr. Sasha, executive director of Yellow Running Shoes, a researcher, engineer, elite runner, and your BFF who's breaking down the science of smashing barriers in women's sports.
Think of us as the intersection of science and culture for women and girls in sport. Each week, we'll dissect the latest headlines and cutting-edge research on female athletes.
Debunk myths about girls in sport. Talk about how hormones affect performance at every age, to the latest research in sports science around mental performance, nutrition, equipment, and so much more.
And we'll spotlight badass girls and women who are rewriting the rules of the game, sometimes literally.
Expect it to be nerdy.
And occasionally TMI.
But it will always be honest.
Whether you're a strong girl yourself or you're raising one, this show is for you. Welcome to Strong Girl Talk,
where sports science meets sisterhood.
Hello. Welcome back to Strong Girl Talk. Sasha, how is it going?
Molly, it's so nice to see you. We haven't connected in so long. It's good. I mean, it's great. The last time we talked, Strong Girl Talk, we talked. I hadn't had my surgery yet. I am now 10 days post-op. I am walking normally. I am sleeping. I am really excited about, next steps. But I'm also, so the whole world and you can hold me accountable, I'm going to be patient. I was asked not to run for 3 months, and so I will not run for 3 months. How are you?
I am finally hot. So we've been traveling and it's been shockingly cold everywhere we've been. Finally, we're in Tucson, Arizona. It's finally actually genuinely hot outside, which is fantastic. Very sweaty, very gross, but I am so happy about it that I have been just outside for the last few days, which is why I'm very excited to catch up on, oh my gosh, this week in sports. I feel like we need like a cool announcer voice to like cue us into that. But for now, we'll just say what a sport week it has been. I mean, pretty much across the board from like the political to like political in finally some positive political news uh to just, really cool, all different sports, tons going on. Um, let's start, because we're hitting March Madness here. Where are we at with March Madness, Sasha?
Okay, so truth, I haven't watched in the last couple days, but I've never watched March Madness before, and so it was great. So, anyways, it's on like television, and for the first time, women have the same coverage as men. And what I thought was super cool on Instagram, March Madness, MBB and WBB, right? Same, but different, but equality and equity, although not equity in pay, but we'll just baby steps at a time. So yeah, I watched a lot of March Madness this weekend. I think the second round ends today, and I think third round gets going just after this episode airs. What have you been watching?
Obviously, I was paying very close attention to Milan San Remo, the women's race, back for the first time in 20 years. So exciting. However, I will add the caveat of, again, pay gap, major pay gap.
Major.
If you're bringing back a race, like, would it kill you to maybe make it a little more equitable? But apparently, yes. So, that's something that we'll have to kind of keep fighting for. And hopefully next year they're, looking at that and upping it. Also, I do just want to come back to March Madness, like the importance of the fact that they're using WBB and MBB, like that deserves an episode on its own of like the importance of just finally saying, oh, men's basketball, not just basketball is men's basketball and women's basketball is women's basketball. Like I love that so much. Yeah. So back to cycling now. I know you were excited about the final sprint with Alyssa Longo Borghini. Me, I'm sitting here just shrieking my head off that Marianne Vos is still in the mix. My God, like almost 20 years ago now, when I first started writing about cyclocross, I was, talking about her, interviewing her, to see her still just in it and in it at the top level. I cannot get over how exciting that is year after year.
I mean, it's why Voss is boss, right? Like we need we need the shirt that says Voss is boss. I am also a major Voss fangirl. Yeah, she's the goat. She is the goat of women's cycling.
Yes, exactly. I think that'll have to be our next Fangirl Friday, maybe.
Well, and we can't, I mean, we have to congratulate Lorena Wiebes for her win. That was, I mean, for, for being, out. It was a great week to be out. The sports that I got to watch was fantastic. But Lorena Wiebes, that sprint at the end, it was really exciting to see. A lot of my male friends tend to say, oh, women's cycling isn't as exciting. You're obviously not watching the right women's cycling because for as long as I can remember watching, that has been equally, if not more exciting than the men's cycling.
Perpetually more exciting.
Right?
Like, yeah,
Right. Oh,
ridiculous.
okay.
Ridiculous.
Hang on. Not on our show notes, but we have to talk about PFP. Pauline Fran Prevost, right? Has dominated cyclocross, mountain bike, world gravel, just and now she's entering. She also, like Voss, was, she was a force out there.
Mm-hmm. And much as I hate to go to the men's side, we have to give Pogača a little bit of credit. He was doing an interview and someone asked him how it felt to be the first world champion to win a race. And he said, he's like, I thought Kopecky won that race. And it was just such an amazing thing because it was a post-race interview. And I mean, to have the wherewithal in a post-race interview to like clock that and then say it. Um,
Mm.
you know what? I have never been like the biggest Pogača fan. No offense to him. Just he's not a cyclocross racer, so therefore I'm kind of like whatever on him. But now I'm I stand Pogača. There we go. It happened.
Yeah. Okay. So actually before I watched the cycling, I watched the track. So it was World Indoor Championships in Nanjing, China. Um, Highlights included Shelby Houlihan, Burrito Gate, made her return. Shelby finished second. I think one of the things I'd love to like sort of share about Shelby is, Shelby admits, doesn't admit, that's not the point. Shelby said, like I served my time that WADA gave me. And you can point the finger, but pointing the finger shouldn't be at me. It's not about talking about whether or not I was guilty. I served my time and I'm now back racing. And if people have an issue with it, and I agree with her, is that really we should be talking to WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association. And currently they do not have lifetime bans. It's not actually entirely, you have to like really make a serious, egregious error for a lifetime ban. But for the most part, bans are anywhere between predominantly 2 to 8 years, generally 4 years. And Shelby served her 4 year ban and came back and trained. But okay, so let's talk about more exciting things. So women's 800, South Africa. Um, Prudence Sekgodiso, I think I said her name right. So South Africa's never had a woman in the 800 final indoors, which I sort of found surprising given Caster Semenya's success on the track. But like she may not have raced indoors, which I get. It's really hard on your body. But not only had South Africa not had a woman, on the podium, they hadn't had one in the final, and she ran this unbelievable, beautiful race, and she won. And it was such a celebration. So it was definitely like my highlight watch of the weekend.
Now, are you like comfortable watching running stuff while you're on this like 3 month running ban?
Yeah, I think a few years ago I wouldn't have had the mindset or the identity to be able to do it. And I've always believed in stronger together and celebrating other people's successes, but I struggled to actually like live that. Um, but no, I'm actually really excited watching. I don't feel like I'm missing out. I feel like I'm on the path to recovery. I feel like things are going well. I could do less with the advice coming in with from people as to like what I need to be doing. I'm just gonna trust my surgeon. He's an expert. But no, I don't feel like I'm missing out. Plus, like I'm watching your adventures, I'm watching some of my other close friends, and I feel like not that I'm living vicariously, but I feel cared for, and so I feel involved.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, continuing the running trajectory, you also have a note about FIS cross country season. Tell us
Yeah.
about Gypsy.
So Jessie Diggins won. It's her third Crystal Globe overall. She also won the distance Crystal Globe. That would be a fun room, eh? To have like a Crystal Globe room. Jessie Diggins is an incredible athlete. For those of you who follow her, her journey through eating disorder and her ability to talk about it in a way that's relational, that's meaningful, that's not doesn't demean anybody else who might be going through it or what their journey might be, but really bringing light to it in a way, in a positive way, I think that has helped. not just Nordic skiing, but many of the endurance sports talk about eating disorders. But it was really nice to see, Jessie take the overall Crystal Globe again this year. She's had some really bad plantar fasciitis. I mean, I totally blame the design of the Solomon boot. Sorry, Solomon, just from an engineering perspective, just that it's too stiff. Just a little too stiff. Give it a little bit more flexibility so that the athletes don't get plantar and they can still race really fast.
Love that. And yeah, I mean, I think the the way that professional athletes can talk about eating disorders and disordered eating is so important. And unfortunately, there's no playbook for how to do that. There's no media training for how to do that. And I think some athletes, unfortunately, when they do talk about it, it almost comes off as like kind of training the younger generation that like this is how you win. This is how I won instead of talking about it in, this kind of more nuanced, like long picture, big picture kind of way. And I think she does do a very good job of it. And I think, hopefully more athletes are seeing how she's done it and can kind of take that as like they're finding ways to tell their stories because it
Yeah.
does, it's a huge influence. I mean, we talked about this in the first episode with, role models. It's kind of an unfortunate thing that professional athletes kind of automatically get put in the role model category because not like it's the
Yeah.
square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a
Yeah.
square kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
not every pro athlete is the best role model, not even because they're a bad person or like not a good person, but because they maybe can't speak about stuff in a way that is actually helpful for a younger generation. And I think Jessie Diggins does a very good job of it. So just wanted to flag that
Yeah.
as like it's not easy to do. And she does it.
Well, and then to the next point, it's not a sport result, right? Eilish McColgan has been facing unbelievably hateful comments on social media about her body and body shaming. And I really loved how Women in Sport UK spoke up about it, but like to call people in, not to call people out, and to say this is why it's not okay. And keyboard cowboy people who sit behind a keyboard and make comments, I think it's really important to think about when if you see something that you don't agree with, how would you have that conversation with the person? And Eilish does a really beautiful job about trying to speak to that. I can't imagine how thick her skin is now. um she's another incredible, and she wants to be a role model, talking about athletes that want to be role models. Like she wants to be a role model in this space.
Yes, for sure. Okay. And then we do have some good news. We have the IOC talk to us about why this news is so exciting.
It's the first time we have a female president. So Kirsty Coventry, she's from Zimbabwe. She's an Olympic swimmer. She's a seven-time medalist. She was also just the former sport minister in Zimbabwe. You're gonna have to give up your sport minister position to assume this very large role as the president of the IOC. So Kirsty Coventry was running alongside six or eight other men, doesn't matter. What's super cool about this is I believe it's the first time that in the voting cycle that somebody has won in the first round. And so, there was, a lot of, there was a lot of press behind many of the other candidates who had put a ton of money into their PR campaigns. And Kirsty Coventry and her husband wrote their manifesto at home together one day to talk about what sport meant to them. And I think that really resonated. And I think, Kirsty wasn't selected because she was a female. It's really cool that she's a female and a woman leader in a leadership position, but she really was selected because she was the right candidate. Her goal is to put athletes at the forefront and at the center of the Olympics, both summer and winter. And she wants to create some more transparency around the IOC. And I mean, at the crux of it, I think we can both agree that those are two things that really need to happen in the Olympic movement.
Yes, for sure. And she does also like obviously a very strong proponent of women's sport. There's a, note from her. One of her things is strengthening women's sports by protecting female athletes and promoting equal opportunities for women at all levels of our movement. That part gets me very excited. The all levels, I think, is, definitely step in the right direction. We're excited about it. Yeah, exciting news. And I think, just the more we can get women into these positions, the more seats at the table we have, the better it is all around, not just for women in sport, but for everyone in sport.
Agree. Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. And then, okay, my last thing is just like the note that originally the FIFA Women's World Cup was supposed to happen in 2026. Obviously, we know that's like not happening. Nothing had been announced, etc. So a couple weeks ago, FIFA finally put out a thing where they're introducing the FIFA Women's Championships Cup for 2026. No Women's World Cup till 2028. So,
Okay.
kind of a good news, bad news situation. I'm a little sad about it because with FIFA coming to North America for the Men's World
Yeah.
Cup next year, it would have been so cool and such a great chance to have the Women's World Cup taking place kind of like almost alongside of it. And I mean, one could argue you're already having to kind of come up with all of these new venues, all of this new stuff for the World Cup to come to North America. Would it have been that hard to tack on the women's stuff at the same time? Okay, probably, but in
Yeah,
my
I was like,
brain, it
I'm
should be
just
very
a
easy. I mean, you're already doing one. Why not just like two games? Just back to back them, just the thought, putting it out there. So, FIFA, call me if you want to, have me
Yeah.
organize that.
I'm sure we can find a systems engineer to plan it so that it actually works, but things are, it's progress, right? It's slower than we want it to be. It's great to see. Please pay them more. Please pay. I think that's what I'm going to keep saying like the whole time. Just keep, yeah. Please pay them
Yeah.
more.
I think that's just like probably the top line of all of our, we're going to start doing this every week where we're just kind of talking about the women's sports highlights of the week. And I think pretty much the TLDR every week is like, pay them more, pay them more,
Please
pay
pay
them
them.
more.
Yeah.
Or, yeah,
And
pay them
you know
in
what?
general.
Well, and not just the athletes, right? It would be unfair to the integrated support teams, the coaching staff, everybody around them, the administrators, right? It's not just the athletes, right? It's the whole system and ensuring that everybody's paid fairly. Because I imagine there's a lot of, director sportifs on those teams that are probably doing this on a volunteer basis so that the athletes can be paid.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then, last thing before we get into today's meat and potatoes, if you will, um, you've been reading a ton. Hit me with a couple of the recent faves here, although I think we're going to end up discussing a couple of them more in depth when we have our emergency episode. So everyone look for that next week.
Well, and not on the list, but I finished your another one of your books, The Strong Girl, which was fantastic. Thank you for that. I read the finale. I think it's the finale to Rebecca Yarros's Fourth Wing, which is like so terrible and so amazing.
Love you for
Um,
that.
yeah, I'm just, anyways, it's fantastic. And then I read Katie Barnes's book. So they wrote a book called Fair Play, all about how sports shapes the gender conversation. And then I'm just finishing Joanna Harper's book on sporting gender. So, I mean, I'm a voracious reader. At the best of times, it was like a nice excuse. I fell asleep so many times with my knee in the game ready system and like a book on my chest, and Rawl being like, okay, yep, yeah.
Cute.
I don't know about that.
I love that. Well, you've put my reading to shame. I have not had a very good reading week. You're, really convincing me I need to get back to reading a lot more. I have been busy on the book side of things. We just launched, the pre-orders for Shred Girls Book 4, which is Lindsay and the Curse of Gemini Lakes. Very exciting. And we are hosting a launch shindig, launch weekend, launch summer camp kind of vibe at the Mansfield Outdoor Center in so just north of Toronto and Ontario. So if you're around May 31st, June 1st, you can check that out. We'll put the link in the show notes for that, but it's going to be just a very fun summer campy weekend. You don't need to ride a bike to be there. We're going to have hike and run options for some of the stuff. There's a scavenger hunt, there's some camp games. It's going to be sweet. Yeah. So very exciting. But let's get into keeping
No, we got to talk about
girls.
one more thing about your
Oh,
camp. One more thing. Molly will sign your book if you come to camp weekend because
this is
Molly
true.
will be there. Yeah,
This is true. Yeah.
yeah. Most important.
I'm also hoping you'll be there, Sasha. You are like on the invite list.
I
So
did. I will be on the hiking team and scavenger hunt. I'm not permitted. Remember 3 months holding myself accountable. I will
hmm
not be permitted to do things then.
I can put you on like the spoon race, although I don't think we're gonna do like spoons and eggs because we don't have that kind of funding. Eggs just too expensive these days.
Oh
But
my
yeah.
gosh, right? Anyway, that's an entirely its own episode too.
Exactly. That's an aside, but we will have some fun stuff that will not involve having to, go super hard and be like an uber athlete to be there and have a lot of fun. So I'm very excited for that.
Me too.
Um, okay, Women's History Month coming to a close. By the time this comes out, we'll be almost through with it, which is very sad. Do we feel like we've moved forward together as per the mandate of the month?
I mean, I think we have. I don't know. I don't know if the
Oh,
rest of the
we
world.
definitely have.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna put that question back to you. Like, I mean, I hid out on the couch like a hermit for the last 2.5 weeks. What
I
are your
mean, I've
thoughts?
I've hidden out in the van for the last 2 weeks, so I ditto that. But honestly, like going around, we were at a couple of gravel races. I was speaking at Savannah College of Art and Design. I met a ton of women coaches actually when I was at Valley of Tears Gravel in Texas, and they were from all over the place. But naturally, like I had a strong girl table up, we had shred girl stuff out, so naturally, women are going to kind of like come over to it more so than men, I think. But had a few male coaches, but the number of women coaches that came over and were chatting, like, they're like getting multiple copies of Allie's Rocky Ride for their mountain bike girls. And that was so exciting to me because, we I think we've talked about this, the importance of women coaches when it comes to keeping girls in sport is just such a huge part of that. So to kind of see, okay, we actually are getting more women who are coaching NICA teams and other like mountain bike teams. It's just so, so important and so exciting. Obviously, in terms of moving things, moving forward together, I'm so excited that we decided to launch this podcast this month. So like, quick moment of gratitude for you, dragging me kicking and screaming into starting another podcast that I have loved doing. So I'm so thankful that you decided we were moving forward together, and we've marched on with that. And everyone that has been listening, you are also moving forward together with us, which is great. And you did an event on that weekend with ASICS Canada, with actually, Strong Girl Publishing author Vanessa Kuhlbeck. Very exciting. Tell us a little bit about that, maybe.
For sure. So it was also in support of Fast and Female, which we talked about in terms of role modeling in the first episode. And it was all centered around the A6 Move for Mind study, which I talk about ad nauseum. I'm not sorry, because it really is going to help, change women's sport. And so, Vanessa and I went down. Vanessa did the mirror diaries, and you're like, excuse me? But this idea of affirmations, statements that you say to yourself that give you the self-confidence to want to chase after the things that are meaningful to you. And I said to the whole group of people there, I said, even if you don't have one, just go steal one off the board. Like it doesn't have to necessarily be original. And it was so cool to see, Vanessa engaged. Sawyer Nicholson was there, who's a, young phenom. They kept saying Sawyer Nicholson for prime minister, which was pretty cute. She's 12. She's a little long ways off, but she speaks well. But, using her affirmations and others' affirmations to really bring the community together and think about what it is to move together. And, I think going back to the question you asked, like, are we moving forward? The answer is yes. And I think it's that women are popping up in these local communities, and it's going to be the trickle up effect that, talking with Ellen Noble last week about like it is sometimes the social movement that actually like drives the political change forward. And so it was a powerful event. I'm glad it was like the last thing I like really did before I was like couch ridden. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. It's a long drive. I will just tell you, I was really tired from the drive.
I mean, it is Canada. I feel like everything is a long drive. Um,
And you
yeah,
can't take the train because it's Canada.
exactly, exactly. Things to work on. I don't know. Maybe Sawyer for prime minister. Will she improve public transit? I want to see her mission statement. Okay, let's talk. I mean, this is very relevant. Keeping girls in sport, the title of today's episode. We've now had a couple of big reports coming out that have a lot of like useful information for coaches. And I think what I loved, we actually hung out back in December at the launch for the Canadian Women in Sports Rally Report. And I think what was so cool was the practicality of the takeaways.
Yeah.
Like your note here is starting with periods, and I want you to dig into it, but I also want to put like shout out the 14-year-old girl who was talking at the rally report that like I think she was asked about like menstruation or something and like paused. She's like, wait, you mean like periods? And then just went off. And I was just so happy. It was just like such a conversation where she was just so comfortable and confident talking about it. And I'm like, oh, thank God. We're at least getting to a point where we're not terrified of talking about periods. So, yay.
Yay. So you're right, right? There were two main takeaways from the rally report. We highlighted the rally report in the first episode, but I really wanted to highlight Kirstie Elliott Sale's research on the menstrual cycle and periods. We're going to use that word, just period. Um, Kirstie Elliott Sale was on a podcast last week, blanking on it right now, which is hilarious. Doesn't matter. We'll put it in the show notes. But talking about, how periods may or may not affect what you do. And what I loved about it was like kind of what comes out if periods are affecting what you do, you got to like raise your hand to talk about it, but giving us the permission to have that conversation. But then going back to the coaching and the piece you just talked about, seeing more women as role models, which is great. What we know is that sometimes the modification is nothing, right? Sometimes the modification is just like, we'll go warm up and see how you are, right? And we'll make adjustments as we go. But thanks for letting me know. But giving, credence to have that conversation. And it's, Kirstie Elliott Sale's been doing this work for 20 years. 20 years, right? And only now is she like sort of, I wouldn't say gaining notoriety, but are we actually being able to have these conversations to like normalize period talk? And so, big shout out to Kirstie Elliott Sale at the, Manchester Metropolitan University and the institute that they've just created and helping to normalize periods. But I guess the takeaway I would say for parents and coaches and people working with girls in sport is to think about, you know, how do you normalize having those conversations so girls can come up and say, I have my period. They don't want to be benched. I can promise you that. How would you maybe adjust training? How would you maybe adjust talking about nutrition to say, like, hey, do you need a little bit more fuel while you have your period? And just really being like open and transparent so that girls and women can have these conversations with you. I mean, I'd love to know if it's come up in any of the conversations around some of the work you've been doing lately, Molly.
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually was just talking to someone yesterday who is semi-related. She has this device that lets women basically pee standing up. So it's like a little like funnel pretty much for, whether you're hiking or riding or, you're a landscaper or an arborist and you like don't necessarily have access to a bathroom. And we were talking and she's saying she has so much trouble getting it into places because no one wants to talk about the fact that women pee. And one of like the biggest articles I ever wrote was about how the women pee during the Tour de France Femmes got blown up. NBC mentioned it in their like commentating because no, not in a good way. Like it like turned into this like joke and like men were pissed that I was writing about it and people were like offended that we were talking about it, even though funny enough, a month later, uh, I forget which race it was. It was some race in Spain. A race got won by one of the main riders because the other women stopped for a pee break and she ignored the pee break and kept going, which is kind of like ethically a bit of a like gray area in cycling. So funny enough, then suddenly we're talking about pee. But anyway, periods kind of have that same vibe of like we've been kind of like afraid to talk about it because like, oh no, if we like bring this up, now it's like, ooh, this is, just like uncomfortable for people.
Yeah.
And it does come up a fair bit. Um, I'm excited that we're having more conversations about it. That said, I almost think in some circles, my pushback is we've kind of almost gone too far about it, where now all of our training, we're having like so many wellness people are talking about like syncing to your cycle and training to your cycle. Unfortunately, your race day is probably not going to happen at the peak time in your cycle for racing. So I think there is a danger for athletes to lean too hard into syncing training to your cycle because then suddenly you start thinking that like there's a time in the month where you're not going to be able to perform as well. And actually research I believe has started coming out saying like clapping back against that, saying like no, you're actually just as capable of having great performances at this time as you are during any other time. So I also don't want girls to start like I want us to start talking about periods, but I also don't want girls to start thinking that their period is like a reason that they're like unable to do something or like this is why we're not performing or like oh because I have this I'm in this cycle now I need to do XYZ. Because I think that's another way of like weirdly like putting us down or like boxing us and being like, oh, you can't do this because.
Wholehearted yes. And that's exactly what Kirstie Elliott Sales says. And what I loved at the end of the interview that she had with Sue Anstis was she said, right now, when we do this, we actually diminish our own performances because we're limiting ourselves. When actually it's a huge opportunity to see how you can be the best version of yourself every day. And if we just think about it being an athlete, Rawl actually gave me this great compliment. He's like, "You're the only person I know that doesn't need physio because you actually know your body so well and what you need to do to recover." But that was my thing is like, that was like coming back, at 32 was like, I really need to know my body. And so, what I actually like, take it as your superpower. So, like, how do you work with your period so that every day you can show up and use it as your superpower? Because then like, to your point exactly, like, you can perform. And Kirstie Elliott Sale just said to Sue, like, hey, like, what I want people to see is that they can do anything at any time of the month. If there really are physiological differences between women, or sorry, between phases of your cycle, then I'm willing to change my mind. But we need so much research, and it can't be on 7 people, like, which is a whole other narrative conversation around research. But we need thousands and thousands and thousands, right, for replicability, right, and repeatability, to really demonstrate that there might be a difference. And she said, for now, the best thing that you can do is just train like you are going to train and be aware of it so that you can make it your superpower and not let it hold you back.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Periods as a superpower. That's what we need more of, for sure. But you
Just
know what we
a little pad cake, a
Oh
little
my
pad.
God. Wings. Oh no. We've gone off the rails here. We've gone off the rails. Coming back, coming back. You know what we don't need though is white uniforms.
Right.
And uniforms were your next point on this list with the rally report. And I mean, they go hand in hand, right? Like you can't talk about periods without talking about uniforms. We saw last year with Team USA's, options on the track with the, I'm just gonna
Oh,
call it like a thong onesie. Like I don't even know. The the options for women were not fantastic if you had a vulva, just putting it out there. Uh,
yeah.
so very glad that we're finally having the conversation that it's not that teams of all levels, right? Like high level, elite athletes, but also like your kids' soccer team. We gotta stop this like one option. And I mean, actually, I have a friend whose daughter, is 12 years old, I guess, sixth grade. And she was saying she almost missed the like try on day for like uniforms for the team. I think it was soccer. And if she had missed it, she would have gotten like the complete wrong size because like the sizing was, you know, just so horrific that like it needed to be done. And to me, there's just something that's like so upsetting about the fact that, 12-year-olds are so limited in their size ranges and like at ages where, it's not only that we need different options from like sleeves or no sleeves and definitely not white. Definitely not white. Let's just do away with white uniforms. Like parents will all be happy. Like no one wants this. But also even, when you're talking about sizing, like making sure the sizing is very consistent, making sure that we have like good size charts, like all of that stuff, like it matters so much because if your kid, especially if you're in like a lower income situation where you can't get a second uniform if the first one doesn't fit, um, there are so many kids that drop out because of stuff like that.
Totally. I mean, and actually just to the socioeconomic part of it, right? Why are we spending all this money on these uniforms? And so, I one of the things I do actually like about what World Athletics did is World Athletics used to have to wear the exact same thing if you were in a relay. And so if you were wearing a crop top and buns, everybody was wearing a crop top and buns. And now it doesn't matter. You just have to be in your team's uniform, which I think is great, right? Like it opens the door that you can wear whatever you want. But thinking about it in team sports and like the socioeconomic factors, like black shorts, does it really matter if the black is not quite the same shade of black as everybody else? Probably not. And particularly at youth sport. I think we want to have matching jerseys, not just so that they look the same, but that sense of belonging on a team. And I think, from a sustainability perspective, like how do we reuse those jerseys, which then becomes complicated in terms of sizing and sharing things. And do we move to like sustainable fabrics and using more of a like cotton blend, bamboo blend type of t-shirt? I don't know on that, but I think it's thinking about things a little bit differently. And I hadn't even thought about the long sleeves, right? In the Muslim culture, like women need to have long sleeves on. And so can you have a short sleeve and a long sleeve option? Uh, Funnily enough, I was late to meet Molly today because actually Kathy and I were speaking exactly to that about youth uniforms and who do we talk to about what's being provided. Not in the show notes, Molly, but I think very pertinent to what you said earlier is, and I don't know if you know this, but often with uniforms and sizing, the lower numbers represent the smaller sizes. And as you move up in number, you move up in size. And so kids then can't actually have the number that they want if it doesn't align with the size of the uniform that they need. And so I'd really rather have a kid have the number that they want and not worry about the jersey size. And so, you know, might complicate things. Like, do we get things printed? I just think there's a better solution and one for us to work through. And then we have to talk about boobs and bras, right?
Ah,
Gender equity. What do you need when you go work out?
maybe you need, I don't. Let's be
Okay,
clear here.
fair enough. I don't actually either.
We're bad examples, but yes, sports bras, very, very important. And again, especially for that very important age where you are hitting like the preteen, the teen years, you're just starting to develop, not a lot of parents are necessarily like even understanding like, oh, my child needs a sports bra now. This is such a tricky, already difficult time from like an emotional perspective to then, you know, have to struggle with that. This is again where I think uniforms actually could play a very important role by having sports bras just be part of the uniform. Like,
Exactly. Equity versus equality, right? Equality is that the boys and girls get the same uniform, right? Boys and girls teams get the same uniform, right? Equity is that, you know, you're provided with a sports bra if you're on the girls team, right? Because you might need a sports bra. Bras for Girls, it's an incredible organization that started out in the Seattle area with Oiselle Girls Plus Sports. Beautiful thing, right? And they've got great resources that are, freely available to talk about boobs and breast development and why it's important about supporting your breasts, particularly through puberty and when they're changing, how a sports bra should fit. But then again, also comes down to like personal preference. Like I know some people are like, I want to feel like I am being sucked in to death, and other people are like, I want to feel like I'm wearing nothing. And so, kind of like having your period, you got to figure out what works best for you. As a pro athlete running for Team Canada, like we're never provided sports bras, right? We're told that it wouldn't be fair to the men and the boys. And I'm pretty sure it's the same across most Team Canada sports. Definitely like want to reach out and do a fun Instagram reel, like throwing clothes down and being like, hey, what's missing?
sorry, I'm just caught on like, oh, those poor men and boys that are left without, you know what? Give them sports bras. They can have a sports bra. Like, why are we not giving them a sports bra?
Right.
Like, if that's the issue, bras for everybody.
Maybe bras for girls needs to change it. Bras for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to come back, we mentioned long sleeves. When I was talking to my friend about this like try on day that they had to like pick their uniform sizes, I actually asked her, I was like, were there any options with long sleeves? Were there any options like with a hijab? And she's like, oh, no, obviously there weren't. She's like, oh, I don't know that there's anyone, in the area that would need one. And I was kind of like, well, I mean, even if there isn't someone in the area who definitely needs one, how do you know that there isn't someone who would have shown up if they had known that was an option? Like, if you don't invite someone in by having options that are available for them, why would you expect them to show up? So this is the same with the bras. Like, if you provide it,
Totally.
maybe they'll come.
And who's not at the table, right? That's always the question that I'm asking. Who's not at the table and who needs to be here and how do we make it inviting? And that's a really good point, right? We got to make sure that in our uniforms, right? And actually, to the point about trying things on, you should try a sports bra, have the option to try a bunch of sports bras on, try a bunch of sport hijabs on, so that you find one that works for you, so that, you know, instead of feeling othered, you find a sense of belonging because somebody's cared enough to bring that for you.
Hmm. And I think these are easy things that parents can advocate for. So as you're listening to this, if you are a parent of of a young girl, of a young boy, like there's always conversation about the uniforms that your team is going to have. I think it's so easy for us to just even the minor thing of like shooting off an email saying like, "Hey, is there a hijab option? Hey, our sports bras provided." Just putting that feedback into someone's ear, I think can make a huge difference and start people thinking. So highly recommend. And most uniform companies have these. Like it's not as though you're gonna have to go to like 8 different sources. A lot of the times these like mass production, sports uniforms things have them. It's just as easy as ticking a box to say like, yeah, we want this as an option. It's
Yep.
really not that difficult.
And I don't think I want to add to that, but make sure, particularly for the hijab, because I think if you're, with a women's sports team, girls sports team, like you make sure that hijab isn't a cost barrier. Make sure it's $0, right? And so if you
Yes.
need to spread the cost out so that it's like an extra 25 to 50 cents for everybody else on the team, but so that the cost is not a barrier. Because again, that's othering them. Hey, you're different. You have to buy this different thing. And it's like, no, let's really make them feel welcomed by making sure we provide that.
100%. Same with the bigger sizes, right? Like how quickly do kids feel excluded if they are in, the whether it's kids or adults, like 3XL is $10 more, right? Like that's such a like it doesn't sound like a huge cost barrier. And, for most people that's not a major point, but it's an othering. So yeah,
Totally.
keeping
Actually,
everything consistent.
and also when that size is not available, right? Like if you are a person in a larger body and you play sports and the sizing only goes up to large or extra large, all of a sudden you may not sign up because there's no sizing available for you, right? Like the whole, that emphasis around like fat phobia and weight phobia, like you've just othered someone and not invited them in to play. And the whole point of sports across the board, right? Kirsty Coventry and Olympianism is where everybody has a place to play.
100%. Okay.
So I mean, it lets us transition to the next thing. Like, why should we play sports, right?
That is exactly where I was going to go. Yeah. I mean, we know, like we don't really need to go through the physical, like obviously finding a way to move your body, very positive from a physical, a mental, emotional, like personal perspective. But there's also this kind of broader thing of the places that sport gets you and like also seems to like um, funnel you into. So this is where the Women's Sports Foundations, the American counterpart to Canadian Women in Sport, they have the play to lead. Talk us through some of these amazing stats that people should keep in mind when they're thinking about playing sports.
Well, and I think you've posted on your Instagram, I know I have, right? Everybody cites like women in leadership positions, women in the C-suite positions. It's something like 94 or 96% of them played some form of sport. This is where the data comes from, right? It comes from the Women's Sports Foundation. I can't remember if it's every 2 or 4 years, they send out a survey to women in leadership positions and they ask them about their sports participation. And we're at a bit of a crisis with mental health in schools right now and with, emotional regulation with students. And Molly, we're both athletes and, we both play sports and we both know that that's an incredible way to learn about emotional regulation. And, just like jumping out at my screen is this learning from mistakes, right? When you have a safe space, and I will argue anyone, I say Adam Grant argue the Amy Edmondson psychological safety of trust and respect when you give somebody a psychologically safe space, they're not afraid to fail, right? Because, and the only way that we actually get better at anything is to actually like learn from our mistakes. And I think that's such a like an important thing in like the corporate world, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's like linear trajectory. Nothing's linear, right? And but how do you rebound from your mistakes, right? Like, how do you like work with a team? How do you create collaboration so that you can actually like really excel? And, those are the types of skills that we learn in sport that we bring to the boardroom. I'd love to ask you what was your favorite thing on this list if you've had a chance to review it. I also threw this at Molly last minute.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, I'm gonna say my caveat to all of this is my least favorite thing in the entire universe is whenever anyone is talking about business and then uses marathon or weightlifting as a metaphor for them talking about business, it is my biggest pet peeve because A, they usually talk about it wrong, and B, I already know how to run a marathon. I don't know how to do a P&L statement. So I would very much like to hear your actual advice on P&L statements. So side note for the self-development and business podcasts that are listening here, stop doing that. Okay, coming back. Sorry, major pet peeve here. This is like the problem with like when you put sports and leadership and business as like uh, you kind of cram them together. You get these weird metaphors that don't really work, but everyone thinks they work. I like the handling pressure because for me, I'm not someone who naturally does super well with feedback and critique and stuff like that. Like I am, a shell of myself if someone's like, I hated this paragraph. I'm just under a table. Um, However, enough start line jitters, enough nerves in races, enough, races that I'm in a situation where I need to do something. Uh, that has made it a lot easier to at least keep my heart rate down when taking feedback. I may not, it's still not my strongest point, I'm not going to lie, but I am much better at controlling my physical reaction to it because it's the same reaction I get to pre-race, like start line panic. So that's the one that jumped out for me for sure.
I love that. Although I'm a start line dancer, and so I think it would be really awkward for somebody if they were giving me feedback. I was like, hold on, I just gotta do my start line routine. I should like give a little dance that although maybe it diffuses it. I mean feedback's tough sometimes, right? Like it's the best way for us to get better at something, but it's not always couched in a way. So I mean, again, going back to Adam Grant's work, what I love is asking someone permission first to give them feedback, right? Because
Mhm.
I need to be in a place of curiosity to actually accept the feedback. And often, and I'll sometimes just say no to people because I know that they're not looking out for my best interest. But if it's somebody that really cares about me to say either like, yes, I'm excited to hear this feedback, or no, I just need some time to like digest what's happened, but I'd love, and then actually booking the time to learn from them. But that person cares about me, right? And so if I know the person is a friend, like a frenemies, never take advice and feedback from frenemies because they're not looking out for your best interest, right? I know if you said to me, hey, I'd love to give you some feedback on this, it's coming from a place of like caring and support and wanting to do better. And I could dance for you and it would be horrible and great. But I think that's like such an important, like feedback's really tough. And we're doing such a poor job of like helping athletes to receive feedback. But imagine telling them, hey, you should feel as nervous about getting feedback as it is before the start of a game, a competition, a race. And it normalizes that like yeah, it's actually it's a lot and it's like nerve-wracking and it's a lot of like emotion to actually receive feedback. So that
Mhm.
is a great KT knowledge translation piece, Molly. Thank you for that.
Anytime, anytime. Now, I do actually want to call out like a problem with this whole survey, like, or not even like the survey is done correctly. Don't get me wrong. And
Maybe
with like
not.
the maybe not, I don't know. And with that like that stat that gets tossed around, the 94% of women in leadership roles played a school sport at some point or played a sport at some point. I think the problem with that is like, yes, that is a great like reason we should do sport. But I think that also is like should be a massive call to action, which is what we're doing on this podcast today. Like that's what we're doing right now. It's a call to action to make sure that every single girl has the access and the like, impetus to find those sports. Because, we see the stats on the early dropout rates. We see the stats on girls that just never start sports. I was in that stream till I was 20. And I think that's actually like that stat should be as terrifying as it is exciting
Yep.
because it means there's so many girls that are missing out on later leadership opportunities because they weren't given the sporting opportunities as kids. Like that's how you can also read that.
Wholeheartedly agree. And this a little bit ties into like that A6 move her mind piece that I've got next, right? And I think I want to highlight number 4, which is like redefine what movement means, right?
Mhm.
I told you I was writing a paper yesterday and it was all about, school sport and schools are the gateway to sport, physical activity and recreation. And to your point, we're really losing that. And we're like, in particular in schools for girls, we're really losing that because sport's been very like historically male dominated, built on a male model, and I mean, I read a book once called Burn Math Class Down. I think we need to burn gym class down, but maybe also burn, down varsity sports. Like, how do we redefine what, the sports are that maybe girls want to play more of, right? And then it's this like idea of like challenging the gendered expectations because you're right. Like, who are the great leaders that are not at the table because they didn't learn those crucial skills through sport to actually be lead. I mean, I'm sort of laughing because you're down in the States right now, and I'm like, you didn't play sports, Trump. You have no emotional regulation. But, I think from a grassroots perspective, we really need to think about like if we're looking at that 94% long term, then we go all the way back to school sport and like how do we make it more accessible? How do we make it more inclusive, right? To your point about hijabs and sports bras, like schools need to have those on hands for kids that don't have access to those, challenging those gendered expectations and just redefining what movement is and not to water down to move away from like what competitive sport is. And I'm like, massive shout out to Joe Baker for helping me rethink that to like really have people embrace that idea of sport is meant to be uncomfortable. And we learn and we get better as humans when we're in a place of discomfort. You have to like go between comfort and discomfort. Obviously, like you can't be uncomfortable all the time, it'd be terrible. But the only place we really grow from is that place of discomfort.
100% yes. Okay, so we need to like wrap up
Oh
because
my God, so
we have
long.
wrapped for so long. But quickly, what are some of the resources people can go to if they are kind of thinking through, okay, how do I action any of this? I know you have a few listed here, so let's just run through them real quick, and we will have links in the show notes to all of them, obviously. And clearly we are a great resource, so make sure you are following along. All right, hit us with the resources.
So we didn't talk about Canadian Tire's Keeping Girls in Sport. It's a 90-minute program that was developed with Canadian Women in Sport and Coaches Association of Canada. To the very things we just talked about, there's a whole bunch of tangible examples in there. We talked about Women in Sport UK and the great work that they are doing. There's also the Adidas Breaking Barriers Academy, and they're moving a little bit away from gender equity to gender equity through an intersectional lens, but thinking also about the boys that don't get to play, which I thought was awesome. Soul Girls, shout out to them. I went to a virtual presentation from Soul Girls. They're a Vancouver-based organization doing some really amazing work. Fast and Female, it's their 20th anniversary. Their update is April 10th. I think we got to film like record like right after that as well. Women Win, and the last one, which is not the least, but the one that I had to put in for both you and I because we love them, is Feisty.
Ah, yes. I mean, all of their podcasts, all of their resources, just fantastic. Great place to go. They've actually been doing some good like coaching girls in sport stuff lately. I think on their kind of main podcast channel, I want to say. I think it's the Women's Performance Podcast. Either way, we'll
Yeah.
link that in the show notes. So good. So good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's wrap up there. Everyone, head over to the show notes. You can find everything on stronggirlpublishing.com/podcast. That's sort of where everything kind of lives, and you can find links to everything. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts, Substack, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, where it's all there. Um, and we will be back next week, or actually early next week, for a special episode. So stay tuned.